Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're gonna rate all of the Undead tribe cards and talk about the synergies, how the tribe plays, and basically all of the cool shit. I dressed up for it, I made a PowerPoint, I don't know why, but let's get into it. So, first of all, some info about the tribe in general. It was revealed by RDU, so if you want to catch the original reveal video where RDU talks about all of them, go check it out on the channel. But the tribe mainly seems to be having some heavy reborn and avenge synergies because undead, dead, dying fits pretty well with avenge and reborn. That might mean that Khadgar becomes more meta. Khadgar is the one that double summons, so whenever a reborn minion dies, it would summon a copy of that. There's a bunch of cool Khadgar synergies that we could explore. There's also two types of scaling with this tribe currently. Actually, maybe three, but there's two main ways that you will see people play this tribe. It's also decent with Menagerie. I think mainly with dual tribe minions coming to Battlegrounds, there will be a lot of Menagerie potential and things you could do with that. But I think there's a couple cards here in this Undead tribe that you would like to have on your board when you're scaling with Menagerie. And that's it. Let's get started with the reveals. I feel like I'm giving a high school presentation again. The first card that we're going to talk about, the tier 1 one, is Risen Rider. It is a tier 1 2/1 taunt reborn, which, you know, if you play Battlegrounds for a while, it might remind you of Acolyte of Cthulhu. It's basically the same thing except for it having one less health. Acolyte of Cthulhu, here's the one drop. It was later put onto tiers 2 and given free health. But still, it is a little bit of a worse version, except that it has the Undead tribe tag, meaning that it is scalable. It can fit in compositions, it's part of Undead. You can maybe find some more synergies than with Acolyte of Cthulhu. That's it. So overall, the stat line when compared to other one drops, it is very average. I don't think this will see like a significant amount of play. I don't think you want to stay down on tier 1 for this. Or pick this over other one drops necessarily. And it also has very little late game potential, like this card in itself. There's some one drops and two drops that could make it farther into the game. This one just seems like it's very underpowered compared to what other Undead cards do on higher tiers. So if you could choose an Undead to put on the board, it's likely not going to be this one, but potentially it's good tech. So I think that this is a card like Acolyte of Cthulhu that saw late game play. Acolyte of Cthulhu was played because it's a reborn taunt, meaning it counters it counters like Windfree Cleaves rather well. It protects your board for multiple hits. It is just something decent that you could slot in when you have one more board spot left to protect your board, or to maybe make sure that if they're putting Omega Buster or Goldrin first, it doesn't die on impact, that you could actually grief opponents. So I think Risen Rider is merely going to see play in that regard, that it could stomp opponents or outsmart them. So I'm rating this a 2. I think this is not something, again, they'll be looking for or that you're super hyped about, but it will see some play in some situations and will have a couple synergies on higher tiers. Now moving on to the next one drop, Rothhide Null, I'll just call him Null, is a tier 1 1/4, which is a interesting stat line, a lot of health, and he does gain attack, and it seems, again, very similar to another one drop we have, Hyena. And we know Hyena is not that good. Hyena just gets +2/+1 whenever a beast dies. This gets only +1 attack, but it's whenever anything dies. Yeah, I think this speaks for itself. I don't think it's going to be very good. I don't think this is an Undead that you will want to have on the board, or to scale or to keep around. But it is good tempo. Like, we cannot deny 4 health on tier 1 with extra attack. If this is like a 4/4 or a 5/4, just like Hyena, it's gonna trade a lot of boards pretty well and you'll probably win your early fights. But I don't think you care too much about that. Also, it does keep attack with reborn, so it has an aura, meaning if this is reborn, it will resummon with 1 health, but with all of the attack that already gained during combat. So I'm gonna rate this a 1. I don't want to be picking this, I don't want to be playing this. I think you will see it on some boards early if you need tempo or if you come across it on tier 1, but that's about the extent of it. Next slide please. Helping Hand. This one, I'm not quite sure this will be on tier 1. It might just be a token card, because this gets summoned by another card on tier 4 that we'll look at. So I'm not quite sure if I should give this a rating, because I don't know if it's even obtainable, but yeah, I'll just put it here. I'll give it a 2 just in case. It's whatever. It's a 2/2 reborn. There's not much to say about that. Now, Nerubian Death Swarmer is a pretty interesting card. It's a tier 2 1/3 A Battlecry give your Undead +1 attack for the rest of the game, wherever they are. So it is a new kind of scaling we have not really seen before, a way to just give a tribe across the board everywhere +1 attack for the rest of the game. So I think it will be interesting to see how this will play out, if this will be viable. But I do have to point out that it's incredibly slow. It is only a tier 2 1 free. Well, if it gets played, it's a 2 free. Still, compared to most 2 drops, that is incredibly bad. Also, +1 attack early on, I don't know how relevant it is. Like, very likely when you pick this up, you don't have a full Undead board anyway. And when you're on tier 3 or 4, having like +1 attack on your cards compared to what other stuff you could be doing on higher tiers, I don't know, it doesn't seem that good. You don't really want to play this 1 free for that. Maybe if you have like Bran and you cycle all of these, you could get a lot of attack scaling going. Again, very slow though. I just don't think it's that good. But maybe it's good with a tokenish build. Like, we might see Undead boards that summon a lot of stuff, and this is for the rest of the game wherever they are. Meaning, I think it also works with Reborn. So when an Undead is reborn, it will still have that bonus attack from this buff, as long if this works like I think it does. So maybe you could see a full reborn, like tokenish Undead thing going, and then you just summon a bunch of high attack minions over and over. That could be something that I'm not thinking of, but I don't think it's that good. I'm gonna give that 1. I don't think I want to be taking this, because again, there's a lot of other Undead scaling that we will see that is just gonna be strictly better than this. Now, next card. Sick transition, Scarlet Skull. Now this one is a 2-drop 1/2 Undead reborn and Death Rattle. Give a friendly Undead +1/+2. So if we look at the total stats of it, it's gonna be a 4/7. Because it's a 1/2, it dies, it comes back as a 1/1, it gives +1/+2, and then it gives another +1/+2. If we tally that all up, it's +4/+7. So it's a pretty decent tempo card if you already have a reborn or an Undead on the board. Because if you don't have an Undead on the board, this is just kind of shit. But if you do, good stats. Now this card is a really good setup for Reborn and Death Rattle synergies. So in case you will see cards or builds that need Reborns or Death Rattles on the board, picking this up is pretty decent. Like, it's strong early, you can keep it around for a bit, and then potentially scale this or have this help scale your board. Now, one thing I will say though is, late game it's not great. It doesn't permanent scale. Like, this is just in combat buffs, so you don't actually gain anything permanent out of this. It's just like a tempo unit like most others, and you also don't want to scale this. Scaling a 1/2 reborn Death Rattle, give your friendly Undead +1/+2 late game is trash. Like, there's so many better cards and better things you could be doing than giving +1/+2. So I think it's an early unit that could help you pivot into a late game thing. Maybe it will stay on the board just because, well, you happen to find scaling, you happen to scale us up, and it's just whatever. It doesn't really matter what card it is as long as it has big stats. But I'm gonna give it a 3. I wanted to give it lower, a 2, but I think it's just gonna be important to have a solid Reborn or Death Rattle on the board already to kind of set up a board for those late game cards that will help you scale with them. So I think it's gonna be decent. It might see some play. And I think it's just an enabler. I think this is the best way to put it. You just need decent early Reborn cards, which will enable the late game stuff to happen. Now, next one please. Eternal Night. The favorite, like my favorite card so far from this entire reveal and from the entire Undead tribe. Eternal Night is just the new age pogo hopper. Dude, I realized it's pretty late, but once I saw this, I was just incredibly happy because Eternal Night gets +1/+1 for each friendly Eternal Night that has died this game, wherever this is. Where, you know, if you remember Pogo Hopper, whenever you played one, it gained +2/+2 for each Pogo Hopper you played this game. So the more Knights die, the more stats they get. And so if you pick this up early, it will start getting +1/+1 every single turn. If you have 2 of them, you get +2/+2 every turn. You could maybe reborn them with cards we'll see later, and then maybe with Khadgar. There's other synergies on higher tiers, so this is just a really cool card that I think I would have a lot of fun playing. Dude, even when I saw this similarity between Pogo Hopper and Eternal Night, I instantly ordered an emote for this card. So once the patch is gonna drop, I'll be forcing this. You guys can spam this emote. Be sure you're following on Twitch. That was a very subtle plug, but I do have to point out it is not great initially. It is a 4/1, so if you play this on the board, it just loses to a 1/1 token. It loses to a lot of stuff. It could trade something though with 4 health, so it could trade a free drop, potentially, but it could also just trade a 1-drop. If you pick this up, you will have low tempo, you will probably not be in the best spot, but it's all about the potential, right? It's about the late game philosophy behind this card. Now, I also want to say that this has more synergies, while with other cards we'll see, and with hero powers, like Lich King can already reborn this. There might be some other hero powers I'm not thinking of that, or like Reno, for example, you just instantly golden this, get some permanent scaling going. I don't know, it seems more like a meme, but a fun meme that I am ready to commit to. It is also passive scaling, so it is something you just play and forget about, and it's gonna scale on its own. You don't have to actively put stuff into it. While with Pogo Hopper, that was the issue. If you have a Pogo, you would have to find another Pogo and another Pogo, another Pogo in order to actually get it scaling, and even find like a Bran, a way to double the battle cries, right? It needed a lot of extra tools. Well, this thing you find, and that's it, and potentially you find some other synergetic cards with it on higher tiers. That is it. Also, one thing that is a little bit sad is it might get too big at one point from its passive scaling, that it doesn't die anymore and scale on its own. So let's say your Total Knight's already huge, you already start winning fights, your scaling kind of flatlined and stopped. And then other people can catch up by the time that these scale. Also, the scaling is not that fast initially, so if people find more active, quicker scaling, +1 or +2 a turn isn't gonna keep up, so you definitely need to find a way to like exponentially grow this, for which you probably need to find other scaling on higher tiers. So I think this is just a nice enabler, a card that you can build around, but then you just need other scaling on higher tiers still, maybe a Menagerie, maybe the other Undead scaling that we will see, and just make this a part of your composition that is just like a big random Undead. So you could also look at it that way. It's just a nice Undead, some nice tempo, passive scaling that could help you pivot into a different endgame. So I'm gonna give this a 5. I don't care, like even if this is maybe a 2 or a 3, I see the potential. I'm gonna force this. I'm gonna tell you, Eternal Night, it will work. I will make it work, even if it's the last thing I do. So 5 stars for you. Next one is Ghoul of the Feast. So this Ghoul is a tier 3, 2, 4, and it's basically a tempo mix, as if Bird Buddy and Ground Shaker made a baby, then it would be Ghoul of the Feast. Bird Buddy has Avenge 1 as well, which gave Beasts +1/+1, and Ground Shaker is whenever you play a Blood Gem on it, it gives +2 attack on your entire board for next combat only. This is a mix because Avenge 1 give plus attack to your board, but of each different minion type. So it's a little bit strange. It needs an Avenge and Menagerie setup. If you don't have Avenge, obviously it's not going to be that good. If you don't have different tribes, it's not going to be that good. Like, it doesn't fit on a full Undead board. So it has some interesting restrictions, which might make it just pretty bad. Like, if you find this very often, it's not going to be useful, but it could be incredibly strong if you have the right setup. Just imagine your power level, you hit like a Red Pack, you hit a Bronze Warden, a Deflectobot, just decent Menagerie cards with Divine Shields and a couple Avenge units, and suddenly you have like a massive board that seems like a Ground Shaker board, but you're on tier 3. So I think this, like, if you have the right setup for it, or the right cards that might enable some good tempo from Ghoul of the Feast, it could be giga strong, and you could level with this to tier 4 or 5 potentially. So that is what I do see of this card, that if you get lucky, you can make this work like really well. But it does fall off quicker than, for example, Ground Shaker, because Ground Shaker, you can keep playing gems on it, it keeps going up, and also you can take the gems off it, put it on something else. It's a nice way to transition into just full Quill Bore, synergizes with Dynamic Duo. Like, Ghoul of the Feast has none of these synergies, it is just what it is initially, and I guess you could find other Menagerie scaling and replace this with it. So that is mainly what I see this for. So I'm gonna rate it a 3. I think 3 stars, good enough, right? Like, I was initially gonna give it a 2 or a 1, but I do see that this card could be very toxic to play against and very strong. So I'm gonna give it a 3 just for the potential it has. But it's not going to be a staple. It's not going to be something that you will need or want to hit necessarily. Okay, now this is a long transition. Fucking love it. Okay, Jelly Belly. First of all, the name, I'm already giving the name 5 stars. But this is a tier 3, 3/5 Undead. After a friendly minion is reborn, give +3/+3. So after your shit dies, this is gonna get a lot of stats. It is during combat though, it is not permanent, so it doesn't perma scale itself, otherwise that would be incredibly broken. But imagine the tempo on this. Like, imagine you have those early reborn cards, either the one drops like the taunt or the skull on tier 2, and then you just find this. You're gonna be so strong. This is gonna be so big so early on. So this is a big payoff for hitting just those early tempo-ish reborn cards. This will be a huge dude, and with that you can level. So insane tempo, so I talked about as well. It's a great setup tool for reborn that you already have on the board, and a leveling tool. Again, this is something that you just want to leverage as a way to get to higher tiers quicker. Again, non-permanent scaling, so there's that, and it might end up staying on your board eventually though. I think that this is going to be so big that if you're on higher tiers and you find your scaling, you might as well just scale this, right? Like, it's already on your board, you can't just sell it because you will get too weak. So I think Jelly Belly is actually a card that you will end up seeing on a lot of endgame boards, just because there's never a good moment to sell it without making yourself significantly weaker. So I think Jelly Belly is a pretty key card when it comes to a particular kind of reborn scaling build with Undead. It's an enabler, it's good tempo, and it helps you transition without taking too big of a hit. So I'm gonna give this a 4. I think this is actually gonna be a card that you will see in a lot of games, just because all of the reasons that I just mentioned. I think it's a pretty good card, and I like the name, and he looks like an ogre. I don't know why. Okay, next on, the Lich Doctor, which is another free drop. A free 2 taunt though. Really bad set line at the start of your turn. Give your minions that died last combat +1/+1. So a start of turn effect, which is scaling. It's basically a permanent spawn of himself. Spawn, that threat will give +1/+1 on your board. This gives +1/+1 on your board, everything that died, but it's permanent. Now, it is still very low scaling, and I think a worse Iron Sensei. Let me elaborate. So if things scale and they get bigger, they might not die anymore, or if you value trade off a good fight, this is basically no stats. Also, it will buff bad cards. Like, you just have a wide board with random stuff you find early on. Giving those cards +1/+1 might not be as relevant, since you're probably not keeping them. While with Iron Sensei, you know where your buffs are gonna land. So you can just find one Deflectobot, a Sensei, and you're giving +2/+2 continuously on a big Divine Shield card you are keeping. So I think a Lich Doctor is just worse in that sense, that potentially it is even less stats than Iron Sensei puts out. Probably it's more, but it's gonna be less relevant stats, if that makes any sense. It might be slightly better, but I don't think so. And then also it is similar to Sylvana's Hero Power, which just gives stats to units that died last combat. Sylvana's is not that good of a hero. The stats that it puts on the board on those cards has never been very significant. Like, it's an enabler for some kind of leveling. You do also have to spend gold with this. With Lich Doctor you don't. But Lich Doctor has a disadvantage, that it's insanely bad tempo. You're just playing a free 2, literally playing a free 2 on tier 3 as well. That is even worse than Sensei, which is already a 4/4 on its own. So the payoff for Lich Doctor comes later. It's potentially not good. It is really bad tempo. I'm gonna give it a 2. I don't think I can give it a 1, just because it could be good, right? You play this, everything dies, you get +1/+1 on your board the next turn. You could have this somewhat snowball on level, but it just, I don't think as impactful as other things that you could do. And again, the tempo is a really big deal. I think tempo on the board, like, is still something that you really have to value. Just putting a free 2 on the board when you are on tier 3 is gonna fall behind incredibly quickly. Next slide. Shit, that's what the fuck. Possessive Banshee is a really sick card. I love this. It's a tier 4 2/7 battle cry given Undead +2/+7. So it only buffs other Undead, sadly, but +2/+7 is a crazy buff. 7 health. We've never seen anything like that before that you can give to others. Like, you have the one that gives taunt and +6 health. This is nuts. Like, if you just look at it as a raw stat line, like, it's already a 4/14, right? 2/7 times 2. And it also might make 4 and 4 power leveling really good, because, well, hitting this early is actually just, like, really good. You're going to be able to value trade a lot of things and stabilize rather quickly. If you go bonker into this, for example, that's already spicy. Or just a random high attack card into the... This is just good. I like it. I had a scaling. If you find a brand with this, oh my god, putting 4/14 stats on an Undead, that is nutty. So this is a really cool card that I think we'll see play. Like, whenever you find this and you have an Undead board, why would you not pick this, right? Except for maybe in the late game, but even that, if you have a brand, it's okay. It is not something you want to keep though. So it's a 2/7 you play on a board that you will sell off later. It is not a permanent unit by, you know, usually at least, unless stuff happens. But I don't think that's too big of a deal. I'm still giving it a 4. I think it's a really cool card, really great card. Yeah. Next slide, please. Oh my god, this is so cracked. A Handless Forsaken. So this is the other 4-drop. A 2/3 though, which is a horrible stat line for a 4-drop. Death Rattle, summon a 2/2 hand with Reborn. And that's the hand that we discussed earlier. It's a 2/2, summons back a 2/1. So again, if you look at the total stats, it's only a 6/5 on tier 4. 6/5, not horrible, but not great either on tier 4, like compared to other stats that you can find, and or scaling, because this doesn't scale, it doesn't do anything. Now it does have some decent synergies. I do need to point out that with all of the Reborn synergies and the Avenge synergies, it does do a pretty good job, because it summons multiple things, right? Like it is going to be able to trigger Avenge very consistently, trigger some scaling. It will be able to have a place on your board if you have the right cards already sitting there. Now I do think as well that it is not something you keep around though. Like compared to other undeads that you could be playing and scaling on a board, this one does seem mediocre, unless the Death Rattle and the Reborn are going to be really impactful. Also, you could Reborn this itself, so if you Reborn this card, it summons an extra hand with Reborn. So I think maybe if you get to Reborn this, it is like almost twice the amount of stats, twice the amount of synergy, depending on what you have going, and then it could find a place on your board more easily. But it needs a lot of stuff to go right, and a lot of different things happening in order for it to actually see a lot of payoff. Now it is also good tech. I do want to say that in the late game you could just put this on the board, or you could scale this just because you know it is going to be good tech against mechs, for example, that have a lot of divine shields. Having a bunch of bumper summon, a bunch of random small cards that can take off divine shields of your opponents is going to be useful when you are just going to be a tribe with really big stats, which Undead seems to be. And that just seems to have a lot of big stats, which is too easily countered by divine shields. Also Leroy, if Leroy is still in the game, being able to put a 2/2 hand into that instead of a big dude, it's a pretty big deal. So there might just be a lot of ways that this can actually, you know, make an impact. But that's the only reason I'm giving it a 3 actually. I was gonna give it a 2 or a 1 because it is one of the, you know, weaker 4-drops that you could find. Doesn't immediately help with scaling, but I just see all of the ways that it could be utilized, and when it's utilized properly, or it actually gets value from this Death Rattle and the Reborn, it could have a place. But I think it's very middle of the road. Okay. That goes hard. Soul Splitter is the other 4-drop 4/2, finally one that we see that gives Reborn. So it has Reborn itself, and it has Start of Combat, give a friendly Undead Reborn. It is random, it is not a battle cry, so you can't permanent Reborn other Undeads, and also you can't target this, so it might land on the one that you don't want to Reborn. This is a good card though. I do think that on itself it's not amazing. If you power level, for example, this is kind of bad. It's a 4/2, summons a 4/1. I mean, that's maybe okay-ish. It could trade some stuff. And you Reborn another Undead, so that means you need another Undead on the board that is not yet Reborn. Well, a lot of Undeads that we've seen on lower tiers are already Reborn, and a lot of Undeads don't really make good use of Reborn. Like there's a couple, like the 3-drops, for example, that just summon back a random dude with 1 health and not really a special effect, if that makes sense. But if it hits the right ones, this is huge. Now, there is indeed crazy synergies, like with Knight, for example, which is the Pogo on tier 2, you just get extra scaling. With Handless, which is the 4-drop that we just talked about, it summons more stuff. With Jelly, if you Reborn other random Undeads, and this also has Reborn, you just get more stats on Jelly in combat, just way more tempo on the board, and with higher tier cards that we will see. So I think it just has so many different synergies, and so many Undeads do want Reborn or make good use of it, that this is probably going to be a staple, I think. Even though on itself, again, it's not amazing, it is kind of random early on especially. I think it's just going to be too important to Reborn other Undeads that you cannot afford to not have this. So I think even though it's a 4/2 and it doesn't scale itself or do any scaling, it probably stays on the board, and you do want to find a way to make it permanent and give it stats. Or it could just be a tech card. You could lead with this, it's a double bumper. whatever. But I have to give it a 5. I was really tempted to give it only a 3 or a 4, but I think it's just going to be too important of an undead card that will enable too many things that I cannot just not give it a 5, if that makes sense. Now, Anubarak, which is the 5 drop, so you have arrived at the big heavy hitters. This is a legendary 5/5 undead death rattle. Your undeads have +2 attack for the rest of the game, wherever they are. Now, it is basically just this tier 2 guy that I said was horrible, which just is Battle Cry, given that +1 attack for the rest of the game, wherever they are. This is Death Rattle. It's twice the amount of attack, but it's only +2 attack. So if you just find this standalone, it's really bad. You just, every turn, you play a 5/3 that gets +2 attack. But if you can Death Rattle, combo this with, like, let's say Baron, or you could Reborn this, or the 4 drop we just looked at. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this that you could quickly get like +4, +6 attack a turn on all your undeads. Again, you build a lot of high attack on your cards, which I don't know if it's that good. Like, we haven't seen a way to scale health yet. We will soon though, except for the 4 drop, the Battle Cry. But are you really gonna just roll for the 4 drop Battle Cry to put on every card multiple times and then scale attack like this? It seems like a very inconsistent, inconvenient, and weird way to scale compared to what other tribes do. Especially again, since you don't have shields. Like, plus attack is not that good on undead because there's no divine shields. Like, you would have to play golden selfless with that. I mean, even that is questionable. So I just don't really like the plus attack package so far, and I think it needs a lot of other cards to, well, get more than +2 attack every turn. Again, it's wherever they are, so it could work with a tokenish build, which I want to point out, like if things resummon. But yeah, wherever they are means that it's in the shop. It means that I think it's also from triples. It's just wherever they are. So if you triple stuff, it's also gonna combine both attacks into the doubled, I think. But yeah, if you have a lot of reborns, like we mentioned, just having high attack reborns trade in a bunch of times could be good against certain compositions. Could also be really bad against others, like mechs or beasts, which have a lot of death rattles. Then you just trade away the high attack, low health. So yeah. That is where I stand on attack. I think it's gonna be iffy. I'm gonna give it 3. I was close to giving it 2, but yeah, I don't really like the attack package. I think it needs too much. I think it's also just worse than what other tribes can do. Easy to counter. And I think Undead have more interesting things that they can be doing, which we'll be looking at. The next one is, drumroll please, Fatty. I mean, Hungering Abomination, but that name is an abomination. So I'll just call him Fatty because he's fat. It's a tier 5 3/4 undead. Avenge 1, gain +1/+1 permanently. Now that's sick. I love this. So it is basically a Mithrax, but with the undead tag. Now Mithrax gained, well, +2/+2. This is an older version that I'm showing. +2/+2 for each minion type that you control. This gets +1/+1 for Avenge, meaning it doesn't really matter what your minion tribes are. You can be full undead, you can be menagerie, you can even be max, you can be whatever. And it starts scaling, so if you hit this early, I think it's really good. I think it could potentially scale more than Mithrax. It can also potentially scale less, depending on how strong you are, what your board looks like. But this also means that you can scale while you are greeding. Avenge usually is playing greedy. You play a lot of small reborn death rattle thingies with, let's say, a Witch Ring or the demon guy on tier 4, Impatient Doomsayer. Just generate a bunch of cards. You can generate other things. We've seen other Avenge cards now introduced in this tribe. So you can play just an Avenge board and now have a payoff for it as well that could stay on the board permanently. I also mentioned but falls off because later on in the game, your cards are going to be way bigger, everything is going to be massive, so you probably are going to get way less Avenge value, and this will probably stop scaling significantly, meaning that early on, you just want to make a decently sized dude, but the scaling does fall off compared to Mithrax, which keeps scaling at a steady pace. But Mithrax, again, no tribe. This does, so this could be incorporated into something. Now, indeed, this plays heavy into the Undead Reborn boards, which again could like put a Khadgar on, but we've seen a lot of other ways that Reborns interact with each other, so you probably want to lean more towards that kind of synergy with this. It might also be good in Menagerie. So again, you don't have to be playing Undead with this. You can be playing anything with it, like Menaces and Red Packs and whatever, and have that scaled up. And then you have multiple tribes. This could be your Undead. You could scale this with a Lightwing and a Brand. You could even fit a Mithrax, whatever. But also, you know, Mechs and Beasts and Demons have a lot of tokenish cards, a lot of Death Rattles, so those are the tribes that go hand in hand with this as well. I'm gonna give it a 4. I think if someone hits this early with a decent enough setup, it's gonna be a big deal and something you can actually play around or with. Sometimes it's gonna be bad though. I think it can fall off incredibly hard if you get too strong, or you don't just have to sell your weak Avenge cards or Death Rattles or Reborns, so it can have some drawbacks. I think 4 is proper though. I think it is better than average. Now we are heading into another powerful 6 drop now. Colossus of the Sun is a tier 6 6/6 Divine Shield Reborn Undead. That is it, just a bunch of tags on a card. Now it's a massive tempo boy. I don't know what to say, but hitting this early, it's a 6/6 with a shield, which is already, you know, a big boy, and it has Reborn, so it comes back as a 6/1 with a Divine Shield, so it deals an additional 12 damage at least. It's basically a Bronze Warden, but smaller. Now one thing though is that this would be really good on a Menagerie board. Again, if you're playing with different tribes and you need an Undead, this is the perfect Undead to use. It's also the only Divine Shield Undead that we have, like the only Undead card with an actual like effect. All the others are just stats or Reborn or Death Rattle, nothing else really. So this is the first one that actually can do something with those stats, and this is also the first payoff we see for attacking or buffing attacks early. So with the 5-drop that we saw, or the 2-drop, I don't know if the 2-drop and the 5-drop that on Death Rattle or on Battlecry give attack to Undeads everywhere there are, Colossus of the Sun is good. Like imagine having played those cards and passively getting plus attack and then tripling into this, or finding this in the shop and it's gonna be like a 20 or 30 attack card with 6 health Reborn Divine Shield. It comes back as a 30 attack one as well. Then it's gonna be a big deal. Then this deals an enormous amount of damage. Again, it's better against other tribes than you know, let's say Mechs or Beasts that can deal with this pretty easily. High attack and just Reborn Divine Shield, they can easily clear that. But if you're facing something like Demons, this is a destroyer. This with high attack can just clear Demons or Naga or whatever pretty easily. It depends on how quickly you can scale up the attack though, and how much resources you have to invest, and if a specific 6-drop isn't only payoff, it's not that good. So again, lots of things have to go right for this to actually be good in that scenario. But it is possible, so I just want to point it out because I know I'm getting comments about that anyway if I don't point it out. Now, this isn't direction itself, so it's a 6-drop that you triple into, but it doesn't do anything really. It's like Gas Scholar, right? You triple into it, it's nice to have, but it doesn't tell you what you're doing or how to scale, or like it is not something that guides your game in any way. It's just big dude, and now you can do with it whatever you want. So I'm gonna give it a 3. I think if you triple into a 6, you probably don't want to see this. You want to see others that help you scale and help you actually set up a board. This is nice to have on the board early, it's tempo, but you still need additional tools to make it work. So if you can find those additional tools, then I guess this card is worth. So it's something you probably want to hit a bit later, but I don't think it's going to be a staple in the meta or something you have to find necessarily. It's just worse than the other 6s, which I'm giving it a 3. So looking at the other 6s now, Eternal Summoner is the pogo card that is gonna give you the payoff. It's a tier 6 8/1 Undead Death Rattle summon to Eternal Knights. As you remember, more knights are my pogo. So you just summon 2 more of these, and imagine you already have been scaling Eternal Knights, right? Imagine you have 2 of these on the board for a while, you're power leveling, you have Reborn on these, everything is going well. These have like 20/20 in stats, you know, best case, or 10/10 in stats, and then you find this Eternal Summoner, which is just a gas coiler on steroids. This is gonna summon 2 more knights, and those knights are gonna have those stats. It's an 8/1, dies, it summons 2 10/10s or 20/20s, which again die and will exponentially, or not exponentially, will just increase the scaling by a lot. You can also reborn this. If this is reborn, it's gonna resummon itself and then summon 2 more knights. Or with Baron, it's gonna summon 4 knights. The issue though is that board space, right? It could work with Baron and Reborn. You will just run into board space management issues, so you'll have to think about it. But what, dude, okay, wait. What if you have like 2 knights taunted in front, and then you just have an Eternal Summoner with Reborn and a Khadgar? And those knights also have Reborn. And that's your entire board. And then knights die, they resummon, and they still get a lot of stats because, well, they keep their +1/+1. Then they die again. Then Eternal Summoner is left with Khadgar. It dies, summons 4 knights. You could reborn it. It summons twice. Like, there's so many cool things you can do. So many combo comps. Or this could also just be, yeah, a massive corner. You can also just pick this up, play it, and have it summon 2 big knights, right? Just have it be some sort of, you know, tempo card in the back. It doesn't have to be your scaling and your engine. It doesn't have to be your composition, but it could be. But it can also just be something, an undead that you're scaling that just summons 2 more undeads, right? Also, if you have the plus attack buff, like let's say everything is super high attack, this summons just 2 more cards with super high attack, has avenge synergies, you know, there's all those different sides to it as well. Yeah, so it might be good if you don't even have the knight setup. It's obviously amazing if you have the knight game plan in mind and have the setup, but even if you don't and you triple into this, it might still be worth picking because you can still pivot this into different compositions or make it work in different ways. There's a lot of angles to look at this. Obviously, I'm gonna give it a 5 again because it enables the Eternal Knight. Everything that is gonna enable Knights, I need to rate 5 because I believe in it. I'm gonna make it work. I see the potential. Might be a meme again. This combo might be a meme and might just flop and not see any play. But even if it doesn't see any play and it's underpowered, I'm gonna get a first place with it. And mark my words. Then there is the last one, Sister Death Whisper, a 6-drop. That is gonna be the biggest scaling engine of the tribe. It's a 4/11 undead after a friendly minion is reborn. Give your undead +1/+3 permanently. So if you have your big reborn setup, again, we saw a lot of reborn payoff cards. We see a lot of reasons why you want to have reborns on the board. This is crazy scaling. Like, it's insane. +1/+3 that triggers multiple times during combat and is permanent is a big deal. Like, you could scale your entire board by a lot. I'm not going to do any math because I don't know how many times you can actually trigger a reborn. And also, if your reborns die eventually, this is going to be the only card scaling itself because all your other cards are dead already, meaning you actually never get like full board scaling value most of the time. But this hitting this early is going to be a big spike, and it's a lot of health. Health is important, and now you can see why you would want those early reborn cards, like the skull, for example, or other ones that are mediocre, just because even though they don't really scale permanently or they don't go into the late game or whatever, they are cards that will enable cards like the 6-drops and the 4-drops and 5-drops, like anything that needs reborn in order to get value. So that's why you want to take those early reborns, even though they're not great, because they're just enablers, and that's why you might end up scaling them. And that is why I gave the 4-drop, the 4/2 that gives reborn. That's why I gave it 5 stars, I think, just because it's going to be so huge, right? It's a reborn itself, and it gets reborn to something else that you can then keep. So I hope you see all the synergies coming together. So it has high health itself, and that might explain why there's the attack scaling in the game. So now you can play the 5-drop Death Rattle that gives attack, or just play the 2-drops a couple times, just because then again you will have high health and everything, and you can scale the attack that way. I don't really like that you have to do it that way, like scale both attack and then health and try and match it up. You need like multiple cards in order to have an evenly balanced scaling going, while with other tribes you can just find 1 6-drop or 5-drop to scale. So I think there's like, you could have really high battle masters on the board, which obviously is not going to be that good, or really high attacks, which I think is honestly going to be better then, especially with all of the reborn. But yeah, combined it seems to work out best. But you need, again, some random cards on the board combined in order to get stats. I don't really like it that much. Like, you either hit them or you don't. Like, if you have this and you don't hit the 5-drops or vice versa, you're screwed. So it's very hit or miss. But anyway, it is passive as well. You don't need to put anything into it. As soon as you hit this and you have your reborn cards, all you need to do is roll for triples, kind of like a beast bolt, which I don't like. Like, it is so passive. You can play the battle cry on tier 4 though, and with Bran, and maybe do some other techie stuff, but you don't have to actively put resources in and buy battle cries or do this and that like other tribes do. So you kind of just hit it, we'll set it on the side, meaning it probably doesn't outscale high rolls. Like, if Naga on tier 6 high rolls, they're scaling, but double Atissa or Gazoa is definitely going to be way bigger than this, just every turn passively scaling. Same with like double Kaligos, Nadina endgames. So other high rolls and higher tiers are seemingly going to be way better than Naga high rolls, or than Undead high rolls, I mean. But it being passive means that once you triple into it, you just play it and you can start rolling for triples and for more useful tech cards potentially. So I'm gonna give it a 5 just because I think this is the payoff of the reborn stuff in this tribe. It's going to be what you will have to be looking at when, you know, playing Undead and you're not going with Knights or Pogo 2.0. And that is Sister Death Whisper for you. So now a quick conclusion for you. So everything that we know about the tribe, how it's going to be playing, it has decent early tempo. So we see that on lower tiers with all of the reborn, like with the Jelly Belly and with the Skull and stuff like that, you could get some big stats relatively early and then level with that and then find the payoff on higher tiers. It does need a setup though. If you want to play this, you do need a setup for it. Like there's some tribes where you can just triple into the 6 or 5 and you're fine and you just skill with that, but this tribe seems like it needs a lot of pieces and a lot of cards in order to actually be able to go with. Like for example, if you triple into the sister that we just saw on tier 6 and you don't have any reborns yet or stuff like that, it seems so slow. It seems like you won't be able to set it up in time. I could be wrong, but compared to other tribes, it just seems that it needs way more pieces to work. It is mostly also just stats, like we have one Divine Shield, that is it. A bunch of Reborn though, that's their theme, but I don't think Reborn is better than the stuff other tribes can do. It has no cleaves, like Beast has a cleave, Elementals has a cleave, they also have no Wind Fury, they have no poison. We did see a poison Undead, but that is not in the tribe, it is just in the hero power of the new hero. I'm not going to discuss that, but the new hero has a pool of minions, Undead minions that are not in the game, that and a couple that are in the game that he can choose to fuse together to make cards. So you could have poison Undead, but only if you're playing that hero. I'm not going to overcomplicate things. Check out Krip's video. Krip did an entire deep dive on the new hero. It also enables the Avenge meta, so a lot of Avenge cards on tier 3 and 4 that will, you know, make good use of all of the new reborn in the game. So we might see power levels again, we might see greed, we might see a lot of econ happening, meaning high roll. Avenge meta usually goes hand in hand with high roll, because it just means that earlier on people have more econ, more money, and more triples lined up. Also the best tiers so far from my ratings and from what I can see seem to be tier 2, 4, and 6, which means that you want to either basic curve this, you don't really want to do tier 1 curve with this, or like stay on 1 because the 1-drops are bad, so just play it normally, or power level 4 on 4. I think power level 3 on 3 doesn't seem as good. Like the 3-drops aren't that great, and the one that is good, for example Jelly Belly, needs a setup. You already need reborn with it, so just hitting it solo isn't that good. While on tier 4 those 4-drops are, I think, impactful enough. And also tier 6 is where the good skilling is at. Tier 5 we have like the Avenge 1 guy, Fatty, but that's about it. We also have the attack skilling on 5, which doesn't really matter. But yeah, tripling into 6s is going to be what you're looking for as well. Especially if you're going with Knights, you want to be on 2 and 6. Just going to point that out. Also, the tribe is mostly passive scaling. It seems like you mostly just want to find the right cards and things are going to just happen automatically. There's this one battle cry on tier 4, but that's about it. And the battle cry on tier 2, I guess, if you want to attack skill. So you want to value leveling. I think leveling is going to be important with this tribe, and getting tempo so you can find the right cards as early as possible and get going. Also, don't forget to leave a like. I put a lot of time into this presentation. I don't know why I did it. Like, I don't know why I made a PowerPoint, but I just thought it was going to be funny. And why I even dressed up, but don't forget to leave a like for that, or subscribe if you're new here, if you want to catch the other content, because dual type presentation is coming soon. I don't know if I'll make a PowerPoint for it. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this or not. If you did, I'm gonna make another PowerPoint for the dual type minions that will be revealed later today, or otherwise I'll just do a normal video and just do a talking head one. And I will also be co-streaming the preview event, so I got confirmation that I can co-stream it. I will have to spectate other streamers playing it though. I will be live on YouTube here, so I'll be streaming it on YouTube, how people are playing the new cards, the new tribe, and see how right I was about things. Pretty sad that I can't try it myself. I would really like to give Knights a try and theory craft and make content, but it is what it is. I will be co-streaming it. Hope to see you then. And that is it. Thank you for watching my PowerPoint. Have a good day.